The breach attempt. The discovery came during what the Vraxian Empire called a routine border expansion survey. Captain Xyloth stood on the observation deck of the survey vessel Dominion's Eye, his scaled fingers tapping against the transparent viewing panel, as his crew analyzed the data streaming across their holographic displays. They had been mapping the outer regions of Sector 447 for 3 standard cycles, documenting uninhabited systems and cataloging resources for future extraction operations. What they found was unexpected. A yellow star system positioned perfectly along what would become a critical supply route between 2 major Vraxian territories. The system contained 8 planets, several asteroid belts rich in minerals, and most interesting of all, a blue and green world in the habitable zone. Initial scans showed abundant water, diverse ecosystems, and clear signs of technological civilization. Xyloth reviewed the preliminary report with growing satisfaction. The inhabitants called their world Earth, and they called themselves humans. Their technology was primitive by Vraxian standards. They had barely begun exploring their own solar system with crude chemical rockets and simple orbital stations. Their military capability appeared limited to surface conflicts using projectile weapons and early energy systems. Most importantly, they had no faster-than-light travel, no planetary shields, and no formal contact with the greater galactic community. The survey vessel transmitted its findings back to Vraxian High Command through the quantum relay network. Within 2 planetary rotations, the response arrived. Earth was to be claimed immediately as a forward operations base. The system's strategic location was too valuable to ignore, and the presence of a primitive species posed no threat to Vraxian interests. A border enforcement fleet would be dispatched to secure the system and establish administrative control. Admiral Krenth received command of the operation with barely concealed enthusiasm. The Vraxian military had not faced significant resistance in over 2 centuries. Most species surrendered once they understood the futility of opposing an empire that controlled 4,000 star systems. The border enforcement fleet consisted of 200 warships, more than enough to intimidate any primitive civilization into immediate compliance. The fleet entered the Sol system 3 weeks later, emerging from faster-than-light travel just beyond the orbit of the outermost planet. Krenth reviewed the tactical display with satisfaction. His ships had detected the expected satellites and space stations, all transmitting on primitive electromagnetic frequencies. There were no defensive installations, no military vessels, nothing that suggested these humans could mount any meaningful resistance. What Admiral Krenth did not know was that his fleet had been detected the moment it crossed into the solar system. Deep within a reinforced bunker complex buried beneath the Rocky Mountains, Commander James Porter watched as warning indicators lit up across multiple displays. The Deep Space Monitoring Network had been operational for 43 years, a web of sensors scattered throughout the outer solar system that could detect the unique energy signatures of faster-than-light travel. Porter was 62 years old, a career officer who had spent the last 2 decades preparing for a moment he had hoped would never come. He reached for the secure communication terminal and entered a code that had existed in sealed protocols since the 1980s. Within minutes, representatives from every nation on Earth were connected to the emergency channel. The briefing was direct and without unnecessary detail. An alien fleet had entered the solar system. Their technology was clearly superior to anything humanity possessed. Their intentions were unknown, but their positioning suggested hostile intent. Porter requested immediate authorization to activate Defense Protocol Titan, a contingency plan that had consumed trillions of dollars and the secret efforts of millions of people across multiple generations. The authorization came swiftly. Every major nation on Earth had contributed to Protocol Titan. What the public believed were international space stations were actually disguised weapons platforms. What appeared to be commercial mining operations in the asteroid belt were construction facilities that had been building military hardware for decades. What tourists thought were research bases on the moon were actually command and control centers for humanity's hidden defense network. Admiral Krenth was reviewing the planned approach to Earth when his communications officer received an unusual transmission. It was a message in the Vraxian language, which should have been impossible for a species with no prior contact with galactic civilization. The message was simple and direct. Unknown vessels, you have entered the Sol system without authorization. You are ordered to withdraw immediately beyond the heliopause and await diplomatic contact. Failure to comply will result in defensive action. This is your only warning. Krenth allowed himself a moment of amusement. The primitive humans had somehow detected his fleet and were now attempting to threaten a military force they could not possibly resist. He composed a response following standard Vraxian protocol for dealing with inferior species. Attention, inhabitants of the third planet. I am Admiral Krenth of the Vraxian Empire. Your system has been designated as strategic territory under Imperial authority. You will immediately cease all military activities and prepare to receive administrative personnel. Your compliance will be noted favorably in your integration into the Empire. Resistance will be corrected with appropriate force. You have 6 of your planetary rotations to respond with unconditional surrender. The response from Earth came within the hour, and it was not what Krenth expected. Admiral Krenth, your presence in our system is an act of aggression. We do not recognize your authority over our space. We do not consent to integration into your empire. We will defend our home with every resource at our disposal. You have been warned. Withdraw now while you still can. Krenth's amusement turned to irritation. He had offered these primitives a peaceful transition to imperial rule, and they had responded with defiance. Very well. They would learn the cost of resisting the Vraxian Empire. He ordered the fleet to advance toward Earth at combat speed, weapons armed and shields at maximum strength. The fleet crossed the orbit of Neptune without incident. They passed Uranus with their sensors showing no unusual activity. As they approached Saturn, Krenth began to relax. Whatever defensive capabilities these humans possessed, they were clearly too intimidated to actually use them. The warning had been an empty bluff from a frightened species. Then the asteroid belt opened fire. The first indication was a massive energy spike detected across hundreds of points throughout the asteroid field. Before Krenth could order evasive action, projectiles began striking his ships. These were not sophisticated weapons. They were solid masses of metal, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed by enormous electromagnetic launchers hidden within hollowed-out asteroids. At those velocities, mass became the ultimate weapon. A tungsten rod weighing 50 kilograms hit with the force of multiple nuclear weapons. Vraxian shields were designed to deflect energy weapons and plasma bolts. They were not optimized for kinetic impacts at relativistic speeds. The first salvo destroyed 17 ships instantly, their shields overloading and their hulls rupturing as unstoppable projectiles tore through them. Krenth screamed orders as his fleet scattered, trying to evade an enemy they could barely see. The humans had turned the entire asteroid belt into a massive weapons platform. Thousands of launchers opened fire in carefully coordinated patterns, creating overlapping fields of death that shredded Vraxian formations. His ships returned fire with their directed energy weapons, destroying human installations by the dozens. But for every launcher they eliminated, 10 more continued firing. Then the second wave hit. These were missiles, but not like any Vraxian weapon system. They moved in erratic patterns that defied his tactical computer's predictions. They carried warheads that released bursts of electromagnetic radiation, specifically tuned to disrupt Vraxian electronics. His engineers had never encountered such primitive yet effective electronic warfare tactics. Commander Porter watched the battle unfold from his command center deep beneath the mountain. The tactical display showed Vraxian ships breaking formation, some attempting to retreat while others tried to push forward toward Earth. Neither strategy was working. The asteroid belt had been turned into the largest minefield in history, and every human installation was coordinated through quantum encrypted communications. The Vraxians could not intercept or jam. "Launch the response fleet," Porter ordered quietly. From hidden bays on the far side of the moon, from camouflaged positions in high Earth orbit, and from underground facilities on Mars, ships began emerging. They were not elegant vessels designed for exploration or commerce. These were warships built with one purpose in mind. Their armor was thick composite plating designed to absorb punishment. Their weapons were a mixture of every destructive technology humanity had developed, from nuclear-tipped missiles to experimental particle beam cannons. The human fleet numbered just 70 ships against Krenth's remaining 183 vessels. The numbers favored the Vraxians significantly, but numbers meant little when fighting an enemy who had spent decades studying your tactics, analyzing your technology, and preparing for this exact scenario. Human ships fought with tactics that seemed insane to Vraxian observers. They used their own vessels as shields, deliberately taking damage to protect sister ships. They fired their weapons while executing maneuvers that should have torn their ships apart. Their inertial dampening systems pushed far beyond safe operational limits. When conventional weapons failed, human captains rammed Vraxian vessels, their crews evacuating in the final seconds before impact. Admiral Krenth found himself fighting a defensive battle against what should have been helpless prey. His superior technology meant nothing against an enemy who refused to fight conventionally. Human weapons were crude but effective. Human tactics were barbaric but devastatingly successful. And most terrifying of all, the humans showed absolutely no fear. They fought like a species that had accepted death as preferable to surrender. The battle lasted for 18 hours. When it finally ended, the border enforcement fleet had been reduced to 27 damaged vessels fleeing back toward the outer system. They left behind wreckage worth billions of credits and the bodies of over 40,000 Vraxian personnel. Human losses were severe as well. 31 ships destroyed and thousands of defense platforms reduced to debris. But Earth still stood, unconquered and defiant. In his command center, Porter allowed himself a moment of exhaustion before beginning the next phase. The tactical teams were already analyzing captured Vraxian technology from the destroyed ships. Engineering crews were working to repair damaged defense systems. And most importantly, the communications specialists were preparing to transmit everything they had learned to a galaxy that thought humanity was primitive and helpless. On the retreating Vraxian command ship, Admiral Krenth composed his report to High Command with shaking hands. He had led fleets for 60 years. He had conquered 12 star systems. He had never experienced defeat. The report was difficult to write, but the truth could not be hidden. The border enforcement fleet had failed. Earth remained in human control, and somehow, impossibly, these primitive creatures had been ready for them. The response from Vraxian High Command came swiftly. The defeat could not stand. The Empire's reputation was built on inevitable conquest and overwhelming force. If word spread that a primitive species had successfully repelled a Vraxian fleet, it would encourage resistance across hundreds of worlds. The Grand Armada would be mobilized, 15,000 ships drawn from fleets across the Empire. Earth would not simply be conquered, it would be made an example of what happened to species who defied Vraxian authority. Commander Porter received the intelligence report 3 days after the battle. Vraxian communications had been partially intercepted and decoded. The enemy was coming back and they were bringing everything they had. He looked at the timeline projections and felt his stomach tighten. Humanity had 6 weeks to prepare for a battle that would determine whether their species survived or became a footnote in galactic history. He activated the global emergency broadcast system. It was time to tell Earth's population the truth. They were not alone in the universe. They had just won their first battle against an alien empire, and now they needed to prepare for war on a scale that would require every human being to contribute to their species' survival. The age of secrecy was over. Humanity would face the coming storm together, or they would not face it at all. The line humanity drew. The truth spread across Earth like wildfire. Within 24 hours of Commander Porter's broadcast, every human being on the planet knew that alien life existed, that an empire spanning thousands of worlds had tried to claim Earth, and that humanity had fought back and won. The initial reaction was chaos. Financial markets collapsed as investors panicked. Some religious leaders proclaimed the end times, while others called for prayer and unity. Governments struggled to maintain order as citizens demanded answers about the decades-long conspiracy that had hidden humanity's true situation from them. But beneath the panic, something else emerged. Something that surprised even Porter and his team of analysts who had spent years predicting how humanity would react to this revelation. There was anger, certainly, at being kept in the dark for so long. But there was also pride. Humanity had been tested by an alien empire and had emerged victorious. Earth's defenders had destroyed a fleet of 200 advanced warships using weapons and tactics that the enemy had dismissed as primitive. The videos of the battle, carefully edited to remove classified information, circulated endlessly across social media. People watched human ships ramming alien vessels, watched the asteroid belt light up with weapons fire, watched Earth's defenders refuse to surrender even when facing impossible odds. Within 72 hours, the panic began transforming into determination. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers faster than the military could process them. Manufacturing corporations offered to convert their facilities to defense production. Scientists and engineers submitted proposals for new weapon systems. Artists created propaganda celebrating Earth's resistance. Musicians composed anthems of defiance. Humanity was preparing for war with an enthusiasm that even Porter found slightly disturbing. In the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Porter met with representatives from every nation on Earth. The group included military leaders, political figures, scientists, and industrial magnates. They gathered around a holographic display showing the current state of Earth's defenses and the projected strength of the incoming Vraxian Grand Armada. The numbers were sobering. Earth's defense network had been severely damaged in the first battle. 31 warships destroyed, over 4,000 weapon platforms in the asteroid belt reduced to debris, and manufacturing facilities on the Moon and Mars operating at reduced capacity due to battle damage. Against this, the Vraxians were sending 15,000 ships, a force 75 times larger than the border enforcement fleet. General Maria Reyes, representing the South American Defense Confederation, studied the projections with a grim expression. She had spent 30 years working on Protocol Titan, designing the weapon systems that had destroyed the first Vraxian fleet. Now she faced the challenge of defeating an enemy that would not underestimate humanity a second time. "They know how we fight now," Reyes said quietly. "They've analyzed our tactics, studied our weapons, examined the wreckage of their ships to understand exactly how we destroyed them. They won't make the same mistakes again." Porter nodded agreement. "Intelligence suggests they're adapting their shield technology to better handle kinetic impacts. They're also bringing specialized electronic warfare ships to counter our communications jamming, and they're implementing new tactical doctrines specifically designed to counter human unpredictability." Dr. Chen Wei, Earth's chief xenotechnology specialist, manipulated the holographic display to show detailed analysis of captured Vraxian equipment. "However, we have advantages they don't expect. We've been studying their technology for 3 weeks now. They're faster than light drives, their power systems, their computer networks. We understand how they work. More importantly, we understand their weaknesses." The briefing continued for hours as Earth's leaders reviewed every aspect of humanity's defensive capabilities. The conclusions were inescapable. Earth could not win a conventional battle against 15,000 Vraxian warships. The numbers were too overwhelming, the technology gap too significant. Humanity needed to change the nature of the conflict itself. Protocol Fortress was unveiled 48 hours later. The plan was audacious to the point of insanity, but it represented humanity's best chance for survival. Instead of defending Earth directly, humanity would turn the entire solar system into a layered defense grid that would bleed the Vraxian fleet with every kilometer they advanced. The asteroid belt would be rebuilt and reinforced with 3 times as many weapon platforms as before. The Moon would become a fortress bristling with missile batteries and particle beam cannons. Mars would serve as a fallback position and construction facility. Earth itself would be surrounded by orbital defense stations capable of independent operation, even if communications were severed. But the most radical element of Protocol Fortress was the weapons themselves. Human engineers had been studying Vraxian technology and had made a disturbing discovery. The Vraxian Empire standardized everything across their military. Every ship used the same shield frequency, the same encryption protocols, the same tactical software. This uniformity created efficiency and simplified logistics, but it also created a catastrophic vulnerability. If humanity could exploit that standardization, they could turn the Vraxian strength into a fatal weakness. Dr. Chen's team worked around the clock developing what they called the Cascade Protocol. It was a computer virus specifically designed to target Vraxian systems. The virus would spread through their quantum communication network, initially appearing to be normal system traffic. Once embedded in enough ships, it would activate simultaneously, causing shield failures, weapons malfunctions, and navigation errors across the entire fleet. The Vraxians would find their own technology turning against them. The challenge was delivery. The virus needed to be introduced into the Vraxian network before the main battle began. This required a suicide mission that Porter had difficulty even proposing. A small team would need to infiltrate one of the Vraxian advanced scout ships, plant the virus and ensure it transmitted back to the main fleet before the ship was destroyed. The chances of survival were essentially zero. Captain Sarah Mitchell volunteered before Porter finished explaining the mission. She was 34 years old, a combat pilot who had destroyed 3 Vraxian ships during the first battle. She had also lost her brother when his vessel rammed a Vraxian cruiser to protect a damaged human carrier. When Porter tried to discuss the risks, Mitchell cut him off with a simple statement. Her brother had given his life to buy humanity time. She would do no less. The mission launched 6 days before the Grand Armada was scheduled to arrive. Mitchell and her team of 12 specialists approached a Vraxian scout ship in a captured alien vessel, broadcasting identification codes taken from wreckage. The deception worked long enough for them to get within boarding range. What followed was a brutal close-quarters battle, as human Marines fought Vraxian security forces in the cramped corridors of the alien ship. The fighting lasted 17 minutes. 8 humans died, but they held the critical computer core long enough for Dr. Chen's virus to be uploaded and transmitted. Mitchell's final transmission was brief. Virus is active and spreading. Mission accomplished. Tell Earth we bought them a chance. Make it count. Her ship self-destructed 3 seconds later, taking the compromised Vraxian scout vessel with it. The Grand Armada arrived at the edge of the solar system exactly on schedule. Supreme Commander Vectress stood on the bridge of the flagship Inevitable Dominion, reviewing the tactical situation with cold satisfaction. The primitive humans had surprised Admiral Krenth with crude tricks and barbaric tactics, but that would not happen again. Vectress commanded 15,000 warships crewed by the finest warriors the Vraxian Empire could produce. He had studied the recordings from the first battle extensively. He knew every tactic the humans had used. He had prepared countermeasures for each one. The fleet advanced in perfect formation, shields at maximum, weapons ready, electronic warfare systems active to counter any human jamming attempts. They crossed Neptune's orbit without incident. They passed Uranus detecting nothing but the expected human monitoring stations. As they approached Saturn, Vectress ordered his ships to spread out, denying the humans the ability to concentrate fire on tightly grouped formations. The asteroid belt opened fire exactly as Vectress had predicted. But this time his fleet was ready. Enhanced shields deflected or absorbed the kinetic projectiles that had devastated Krenth's ships. Point defense systems destroyed incoming missiles before they could release their electromagnetic pulse warheads. The fleet continued advancing, systematically destroying human weapons platforms by the thousands. Vectress allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The humans were fighting exactly as expected and they were losing. Then Captain Mitchell's virus activated. The effect was not immediate or obvious. It started with minor glitches. A shield generator showing incorrect power readings, a weapons targeting system requiring manual recalibration, a communications relay routing messages through unnecessary nodes, individual problems on individual ships, easily dismissed as battle stress on complex systems. But across 15,000 vessels, those minor problems were multiplying exponentially. On the Inevitable Dominion's bridge, Vectress first realized something was wrong when 3 ships in his forward formation reported simultaneous shield failures. He ordered engineering teams to investigate, but before they could respond, 17 more ships reported similar problems, then 43, then hundreds. The virus was cascading through his fleet's integrated computer systems, exploiting the standardization that made Vraxian military logistics so efficient. Ships began dropping out of formation as their propulsion systems malfunctioned. Weapons batteries fired randomly or not at all. Communications became garbled as the quantum network that coordinated the fleet descended into chaos. Vectress screamed orders to his technical staff, demanding they purge the infected systems, but the virus had been designed specifically to resist such efforts. Every attempt to remove it triggered additional malfunctions. Commander Porter watched the Vraxian fleet dissolve into confusion and felt a mixture of triumph and sorrow. Captain Mitchell and her team had given their lives to make this possible. Now it was time to capitalize on their sacrifice. He gave the order that would commit every remaining human asset to battle. From hidden positions throughout the solar system, Earth's fleet emerged. Every operational warship, every armed transport, every vessel that could mount a weapon joined the attack. They struck the crippled Vraxian formation from multiple directions simultaneously, targeting ships struggling with system failures and unable to coordinate defensive responses. Human vessels that would have been hopelessly outmatched in a fair fight now found themselves attacking enemies that could barely fight back. The battle became a slaughter. Vraxian ships exploded by the hundreds as human weapons found shields offline or weapon systems non-functional. Some Vraxian captains managed to purge their systems of the virus, but by then, they were isolated and outnumbered. Human fighters swarmed damaged vessels, their pilots showing the same reckless courage that had characterized the first battle. When weapons ran dry, ships rammed their targets. When ammunition was exhausted, captains used their vessels as battering rams. Supreme Commander Vectrus watched his grand armada die around him, 15,000 ships reduced to burning wreckage scattered across millions of kilometers. He had one final option, one last chance to salvage something from this disaster. He ordered all remaining functional ships to target Earth directly. If he could not conquer the human homeworld, he would at least destroy it. Better to render the planet uninhabitable than allow this humiliation to stand. 3,000 Vraxian ships, barely functional and desperately trying to coordinate through corrupted computer systems, turned toward the blue and green world that had defied their empire. They never made it. Earth's orbital defenses, the final layer of Protocol Fortress, opened fire with every weapon humanity had built over 4 decades of secret preparation. The Vraxians ran into a wall of missiles, particle beams, kinetic projectiles, and nuclear warheads. Some ships broke through, managing to fire on Earth's surface before being destroyed. Cities burned. Millions died. But Earth survived. The battle ended after 31 hours of continuous fighting. Of the Grand Armada's 15,000 ships, fewer than 200 escaped back toward Vraxian space. Earth's losses were catastrophic. Nearly every military vessel had been destroyed or damaged beyond repair. The asteroid belt's defenses were completely eliminated. Orbital platforms were reduced to debris. But humanity had won. Commander Porter stood in the ruined command center, half buried by collapsed ceiling panels, and composed his report to Earth's government. The Vraxian Empire had been dealt a defeat unprecedented in their 3,000-year history. 2 fleets totaling over 15,000 ships had been destroyed by a species they had dismissed as primitive. The financial cost alone would cripple Vraxian expansion efforts for decades. The psychological impact would be even more significant. But Porter's report included a warning. Humanity had won because the Vraxians underestimated them twice. There would not be a third time. If the Vraxian Empire attacked again, they would bring their full might. Millions of ships. Weapons designed specifically to counter human tactics. They would reduce Earth to ashes rather than accept another defeat. Yet something had changed in the galaxy. Other species had been watching the battles. The recordings had been broadcast on every frequency humanity could access, showing a primitive species defeating an empire that had conquered thousands of worlds. In the weeks following Earth's victory, Porter's team intercepted communications from dozens of alien civilizations. Some expressed shock, others showed admiration. A few hinted at their own resentment toward Vraxian dominance. 6 months after the battle, the first official contact arrived from a coalition of neutral species. They offered to mediate between Earth and the Vraxian Empire, to establish formal boundaries and prevent further conflict. The message acknowledged something that changed humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Earth had earned the right to exist as an independent civilization. Humanity had drawn a line in space and defended it against impossible odds. The negotiations took 3 years. In the end, the Vraxian Empire officially recognized Earth's sovereignty over the Sol system and agreed to a permanent exclusion zone extending 10 light-years in all directions. Humanity gained formal recognition from the Galactic Council and began the process of joining the wider interstellar community as equals rather than subjects. Commander Porter retired shortly after the treaty was signed. He spent his final years writing a comprehensive history of Protocol Titan and the battles that saved humanity. The last words of his memoir became a motto for Earth's expanding military forces. They thought our borders were an invitation. They discovered our borders were a promise. Cross this line and learn what humanity truly means. Earth had entered the galactic stage not as victims or subjects, but as warriors who had proven their worth in the only language empires understood: power, determination, the absolute refusal to surrender. The Vraxian Empire had tried to breach Earth's borders and discovered that some lines should never be crossed. Humanity had spoken, and the galaxy had listened.